That's history, man. Madness, mayhem, devastation. So then it begs that question, well then why? Why should we go on? Why should we do what we do? Why should we bother continuing? And that is that why that everybody has to answer. You can go through life just like numb or ignorant and just go, I'm just gonna live. And there's nothing wrong with that. However you choose to live, that's how you choose to live. And some of us, in fact, most of us just choose to live a biological existence. On Monday, I'm just gonna live and see what happens. And then Tuesday, I'll wake up and see what happens. But understand that that's very difficult. It's very difficult to live like that and to live a life of achievement without plans and objectives, without goals, without benchmarks, without things that you're always actively trying to accomplish. Because we know what the end of it's all going to be. We know that even if you die heroically on a battlefield in Scotland 1,000 years from now, no one will know you. We know that even if you conquer the entire known world of your day, you won't be remembered in 5,000 years. So maybe getting the idea of being remembered out of our heads. History, reading about our madness, our chaos, the mayhem, our devastation. What's that?
Entertainment.
Yeah, because history is entertained by our suffering. Yeah, history is entertained by our suffering. History is not just the suffering. History is being entertained by it. Think about the kinds of things that we oftentimes like to read about. A lot of it is that dark stuff, man. I mean, the very fact that we introduced this quote last year when they asked me for the darker stuff should kind of tip us off that we really like reading about dark stuff. You know, like I was talking about, I was talking to the class, I think it was last year, I hope it was last year, I hope it wasn't this year. If I offered you guys the opportunity, I could bring in two speakers. One of them was in prison for 17 years, on and off throughout his life, not in one straight go, but on and off for about 17 years. I don't even know if he graduated from high school. It's a friend of mine. He may never have graduated from high school, but he can come in here and talk to you about his life and where he is. Another speaker could come in and talk to you about how he started a business here in National City, came from very little, came from nothing, single parent, all that. And today he owns a company that some of you might recognize called City Painting. If you pay attention, you might see his trucks driving all over here, all over San Diego. They paint like residential, obviously property, like houses. They also paint apartment complexes. And the guy's worth quite a bit of money. He's done pretty well for himself. So if I offered you the opportunity, who would you rather hear from? The convicted felon who spent 17 years in prison, or the guy who started a small business and has done pretty well for himself? Who would most of us like to hear from? The felon, the criminal, bad guy. The good news, by the way, is that those two people are the same person. There's a friend of mine, he got himself together. He spent 17 years in prison, in and out. And he's a really funny dude, man. He's a really funny dude. He goes to my gym. I remember one time he says things sometimes that I don't know if he's actually, I don't know if he's serious, but he's hilarious. Like we went, my gym used to be over down by Division, and we'd just go for like a 1 mile run before training. And I'd ask him, for some reason it was hard over there. Like if I'm running over by my house, I live in South Park. If I'm running by my house, I'll go do 3 miles, whatever, it's a warm up. But for some reason, doing 1 mile down there by Division was tough. And I'd tell him afterwards, God, this is like way harder than doing 3 miles over by my house. And he would always nod and just go, everything's harder in the hood, bro. And he would say it in a way that I don't know if he was serious, or if he's an idiot, or if he was being funny, which are, I guess, the best kinds of jokes. But anyway, we typically like to hear from the criminal or the bad person or history's villains. That's the stuff we like to read about. Those are the things that entertain us. There's a very small group of people who like to read about the successful entrepreneur, because those are the people who like to follow in those footsteps, and they have opportunities to make money and do well. But yeah, man, history, we like reading about the bad stuff. I mean, like, sure, it's great to hear about how we went to the moon, but we really like hearing about the rockets that blew up on the way over there. You know? But it also creates a perspective such that, yeah, this is history, mayhem, devastation, and it's innumerable souls. I mean, I was reading about a battlefield that was discovered, I think in Scotland or something like that. And it was from a battle that happened over 1,000 years ago, and they uncovered 5,000 bodies that were buried there from this one battle. And it's such a trip, man. You think about it. Nobody knows who they were. It was a battle that wasn't even recorded. They didn't even have a history of it. It was just like this thing happened 1,000 years ago. 5,000 people never came back from it, and that was it. And that's such a trip, man. To think about how people were born and they lived. They had hates and passions and loves, and then they died on a battlefield in the middle of Scotland. And nobody has any idea who they even are. Nobody even remembers the battle happened. And then why? Because that's our history. It's just what happens, unfortunately. So it begs that question, of course, then. So why? Why bother living? Why bother doing anything? Nothing's going to be remembered. And it's pretty true. It's pretty true that nothing will be remembered. Do you guys, anybody remember Nebuchadnezzar? You read about Nebuchadnezzar? No? Let me clutch my pearls. You've never heard of Nebuchadnezzar? By the way, almost nobody has. You'd have to really study history or be a professor to really know who this person was. Long story short, he was a Babylonian king who conquered the entire known world of his time. About 5,000 years ago. And yet today, none of us know who this person is. So if I ask you, what are you doing in your life? What is it that you want to accomplish? If you say, I want to be remembered. No chance, man. No chance. Try this. Show of hands. How many of you guys, and keep your hands up. How many of you guys know your parents' names? Try this. Okay, keep your hands up. How many of you guys know your grandparents' names? How about your great-grandparents' names? Oh, great-great-grandparents' names? One person. So if you want to be remembered, that's about how far back it's going to go. Great-great-grandparents' names. So you're going to go back maybe 80 years or so, I'm guessing. So it begs the question, what's the point? Unless I do something terrible. But even if you do something terrible, you're not really remembered for very long. You know, the guy who shot up that school in Georgia a couple days ago. Anybody remember his name? Yeah. It's got a funny name, by the way. His name is Colt Gray. Oh, I just remember the name because he's named after a gun, the Colt 45. That's a funny thing to name your kid. How do you think that's going to turn out? It's like if you give your kid that bowl cut, you're responsible for the shooting at that point, man. You give your kid that haircut, you give him the school shooter haircut, then then he shoots up a school and we're like, we had no idea. You gave him the haircut, dude. Come on, how do you think that's going to turn out? But that's history, man. Madness, mayhem, devastation. So then it begs that question, well then why? Why should we go on? Why should we do what we do? Why should we bother continuing? And that is that why that everybody has to answer. Because you can go through life just like numb or ignorant and just go, I'm just going to live. And there's nothing wrong with that. However you choose to live, that's how you choose to live. I mean, I'm the last person in the world who's going to try to judge you for how you decide to live. And I told you before, I'm not a role model myself, so I'm not trying to change anyone's life, man. But I'm trying to give you tools so that you can live the life that you choose to live. And some of us, in fact, most of us just choose to live a biological existence. On Monday, I'm just going to live and see what happens. And on Tuesday, I'll wake up and see what happens. But understand that that's very difficult. It's very difficult to live like that and to live a life of achievement without plans and objectives, without goals, without benchmarks, without things that you're always actively trying to accomplish. Because we know what the end of it's all going to be. We know that even if you die heroically on a battlefield in Scotland 1,000 years from now, no one will know you. We know that even if you conquer the entire known world of your day, you won't be remembered in 5,000 years. So maybe getting the idea of being remembered out of our heads and then finding something else that motivates us and propels us. Because otherwise, what are we doing? So you've probably heard me say it before 10, 15, 20 times, but life is suffering. And we don't get to choose not to suffer. We all know this. But you can choose what it is you're going to suffer for. That's freedom. So it's about finding something in your life that makes the suffering worthwhile. and then transcending the suffering, overcoming it, making the whole thing worthwhile. History has a hard time with that. But on an individual level, well, there might be a goal there. Questions, comments, concerns, complaints, criticisms, critiques? Happy Monday.